Here's a look at my top 15 defensive forwards in the NBA so far this season. First up, we have Jalen Williams. Not many players have better instincts and anticipation than Williams, who has recorded the 6th most deflections as of December 13th and the 2nd most steals. He also ranks high in collecting loose balls. The Thunder as a team rank near or at the top in several defensive categories, including ranking number 1 in both opponent points off turnovers and opponent points in the paint. OKC has the league's top defensive rating in general. Before I get into the rest of the list, I just want to give some honorable mentions, including Peyton Watson, PJ Washington, Zaire Williams, Haywood Highsmith, Ryan Dunn, Mikal Bridges, and Jabari Smith Jr. Next up, we have Keegan Murray. Keegan has guarded more shots in isolation than any other player in the league, and opponents have made just 32% of them, which is extraordinary. He does a great job of obstructing shots with his heavy contesting. In fact, that's a category he ranks number 1 in the league in. He's also drawn 7 charges. The Kings as a team are very good defending in transition. Opponents have taken the fewest shots against them while on the move. Now we have Franz Wagner. From November 8th until December 6th, which was the night he tore his right oblique, opponents shot just 40.3% with Franz as the nearest defender. In that time frame, that defensive mark ranks 7th among the 93 players who were the closest defender to at least 150 shots. In the 2 games Paul George has played against Orlando, he was 1 of 9 with Franz guarding. In 3 games Pascal Siakam has played the Magic, he was 2 of 9 against Franz. Even though he's obviously going to fall back by not playing these next few weeks, Franz is currently among the leaders in steals and deflections. Moving on to Toumani Camara. The thing Camara does more than anyone else in the league is pressure ball handlers up the court. He moves his feet very well and has excellent technique forecasting opponent shifts. He's caused 19 turnovers in these situations, which is tied for 2nd most. He's also willing to sacrifice his body. He's already drawn 10 charges, tied for 2nd most. He and Deni Avdija guard a lot of shots in transition, as opponents really like to get out and run against the Blazers. The thing about Portland that really stands out to me is that they have a defensive rating of 106.9 when Camara and Donovan Clingan are on the floor together. The Blazers' defensive rating in general as a team is 115.9. Here we have Jaden McDaniels. McDaniels is another forward that pressures ball handlers up the court quite frequently. He's done it the 14th most times in the league, and Minnesota forces a lot of turnovers with him applying that pressure. He's also averaging a career high in steals. So far he has 26 of them, and with his length, he's one of the better defenders guarding the 3-point line. The Timberwolves rank 4th as a team in opponent 3-point percentage. Next up, we have Giannis Antetokounmpo. What's standing out most about Giannis defensively is his defensive mark in the paint that's outside of the restricted semicircle. From that region, opponents are shooting just 34% on 50 attempts against him, which ranks 6th best out of the 94 players who have guarded at least 50 shots from this area. Meanwhile, never has a player averaged at least 30 points, 6 assists, and 1.5 blocks in a season since blocks started getting recorded in 1973. Giannis is currently doing that. As a team, Milwaukee is among the better teams at limiting opponent second chance points and opponent points in the paint. Andrew Wiggins is next. Although he's missed a few games lately with an injury, there isn't a player right now forcing opponents into more difficult shots in isolation than Wiggins, and opponents are shooting just 35% on those attempts, which is a very impressive defensive mark. He's generally tasked with guarding the other team's best offensive players. For example, in 2 games against OKC, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander only made 3 of his 9 shots, with Wiggins defending. Another noteworthy stat is that opponents are shooting just 40% on drives against Wiggins, which is among the better marks in the league. Now we have his teammate Draymond Green. A big thing about the Warriors is that they do a great job forcing opponents into a lot of tough shots, as I mentioned with Wiggins. In fact, they rank 3rd in defensive QSQ, which is a measurement formulated by Second Spectrum that assesses shot quality based around a variety of factors, including the location of the shot, the type of shot, the distance of the shot, how many defenders were nearby, and the contest level. Green plays a big part in that. Among all shots he's been the closest defender to, he has heavily contested 74% of them, which ranks in the top 5 among the 133 players who have been the closest defender to at least 200 shots. This is a big reason why opponents are shooting just 42% with Green defending. He's also drawn 7 charges so far, tied for 6th most. He's a phenomenal help defender as well, with incredible instincts and physicality. Now we have Tari Eason. Among the 133 players who have been the nearest defender to at least 200 shots, Eason has the 11th best defensive field goal percentage at 41.3%. He's also among the best at deflecting passes and collecting defensive loose balls. He's currently the only player in the league averaging at least 2 steals and 1 block. Since 2010, the only player to do that in a season with at least 40 games played was Draymond Green in 2016-17. Eason is also really impressive at staying in front of ball handlers. His defensive blow-by percentage on drives is just 17%. Opponents are shooting just 40% on drives when he is the ball handler defender. Here now we have Jaylen Brown. The best stat on Brown is that opponents are shooting just 29% from three-point range with him as the nearest defender. He's one of only 5 players out of 86 that have guarded at least 100 threes, holding opponents to under 30% three-point shooting. Another interesting thing about Brown is how infrequently opponents convert on N1s when he is the fouler. He doesn't foul much to begin with, but so far opponents are 1 of 23 when drawing a shooting foul on Brown. That's tied with Giannis Antetokounmpo for number 1 in the league amongst qualified players. Moving on to Dillon Brooks. Brooks is the only player with an individual defensive rating under 102 while averaging over 30 minutes per game. Kind of a funny and maybe coincidental stat on him is that he's been averaging the same number of fouls each season, which is one of his weaknesses. Each of the last 3 years, he's averaged 3.3 fouls. That is his current average this year. There aren't many players, though, who play with more physicality and aggression than Brooks. I recommend watching him guard bigs in the post, as you can really see his tenacity on full display. Here are some clips that show just how relentless and determined he is trying to prevent the opponent from getting deep position down low. He's also among the best at defending players coming off-ball screens. The Rockets rank number 1 in opponent shooting percentage on shots taken off-ball screens. Now we have OG Anunoby. Not many players, if any the last couple years, have had more success guarding in isolation than Anunoby. So far this year, opponents have taken 26 shots with OG as the one-on-one defender, and they've made just 7 of them. That's 26.9%, which ranks number 1 among forwards and 3rd overall. Something else about OG is that he's the only player this year averaging at least 1.5 steals and 1.2 blocks. He leads the league for most blocks on three-point attempts, with 9 of them so far. His defensive blow-by percentage on drives is just 16%, 11th lowest out of the 138 players who have defended at least 100 drives. He's also 2nd right now in deflections. Next up, we have Jaylen Johnson. The big marker for Johnson is that among all forwards, he has the best DQSI mark, which stands for Defensive Quantitative Shooter Impact, and is calculated by subtracting opponent effective field goal percentage by defensive QSQ, which essentially are the quality of shots the opponents are taking. Among all players who have guarded at least 300 shots, which is 27 players, he ranks number 1 in that category. When the shot is heavily contested by Johnson, opponents are shooting a league worst 32.8%. He's also one of only 16 players averaging at least 1 steal and 1 block per contest. And then when he's on the floor, Atlanta's defensive rating is 110.3. When he's off, it's a team worst 115.9. Here's Jonathan Isaac. Isaac's individual defensive rating is 100.5, which ranks number 1 among forwards who have appeared in at least 20 games. Also among those players, he has the highest per 36-minute block average. It's almost impossible to score on him near the basket. Within 4 feet of the hoop, in the low restricted semicircle, opponents are shooting just 44.4% against him. That ranks 3rd, behind only Victor Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren. He added a lot of muscle over the offseason, and you could see that paying off. He shows much more resistance when guarding in the post, for example. And finally, we have Evan Mobley. Just looking at every advanced defensive category, and Mobley ranks right up there near the top. Opponents are shooting 42% overall with him contesting. Beyond 10 feet, opponents are shooting just 31%, second lowest among those with at least 150 contests from that deeper range. Also, he's only given up 9 and 1 so far, which is very low for how many times he's the primary defender on shot attempts. When switching in the pick and roll, which he and Jared Allen do a lot of, opponents are shooting just 41.9%. His defensive blow-by percentage on drives is just 17%. When Mobley is on the court, Cleveland's defensive rating is 105.0. When he's off, it's 115.4. That's a substantial difference. Either he or Victor Wembanyama should probably be in the driver's seat to be the defensive player of the year right now. So that'll wrap up this video. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe.